Welcome to Talentwise, the definitive podcast for CXOs, human resource and learning and development leaders. This show comes to you from thought leaders who talk about human capital development in today's organization. How to engage and empower today's employee to be effective, competitive and relevant. Stay with us for an exciting conversation with our guest and learn how to future-proof your team. I'm your host Shubhanjan, founder of Knowledge Bridge. Our guest today is Suman Ghosh, co-founder of Inroads Leadership Development, where they equip organizations to achieve great performance and meaningful growth.
Going back to that framework that I started off with in Gary Hamel's creative economy, he actually also lists the human characteristics that define each of these economies. So he says that when it started with the Industrial Revolution, it was more about obedience and diligence, to be able to follow rules and to have a certain amount of responsibility, accountability. The person comes into work, punches in 9 hours, and that was good enough. Enter the knowledge economy. One layer got built on top of that, which was knowledge and intellect. Okay, the person not only had to be diligent, but also had to bring in certain skill sets, whether it's Java or whatever, right? Now, these things are enforceable by management. You can demand diligence, you can demand obedience. But problem is in the creative economy, what is required according to Gary Hamel is initiative, creativity and passion. And unfortunately, these things cannot be demanded.
Suman has over 2 decades of corporate work experience in some of the world's top multinational companies such as Cadbury's, Intel, Philips and PricewaterhouseCoopers. He is the co-author of a book on emotional intelligence, From Command to Empathy, Using EQ in the Age of Disruption, published by HarperCollins. Suman holds an undergraduate degree from Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, and is an MBA from Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. Now, on to this great episode of Talentwise with Suman Ghosh. Suman, welcome to Talentwise. I'm excited to have you on the show. You have been looking at industry from various angles and last several years as an consultant. You can see the change that is sort of taking over most industries driven by technology. From your vantage point, what do you see is triggering this, creating this change, and where do you see it going?
Okay. First of all, thank you, Shubhanjan, for having me on the show. I'm equally excited to be on the show. The question that you raise is a very pertinent one. And maybe I'll start with a framework which is very close to my heart. Gary Hamel, who wrote The Future, among many books, he wrote The Future of Management many years back. He actually came up with a very interesting framework for how the economies are changing. According to him, it started with the industrial economy, and then it moved to a knowledge economy, and then we are now moving into a creative economy. And this creative economy is the interesting one, and it's very different from the other two. And the thing is, all this is no longer textbookish. It is happening, it's playing out right in front of our eyes. So for instance, let's look at in Bangalore, where I'm based out of. If I am looking out, as I'm driving down, I see all these kind of economies coexisting. You have these small manufacturing setups, which are probably producing certain products, maybe garments or some tools. You have the huge IT parks, which are part of the knowledge economy. And then you have these co-working spaces, which are actually housing all these different startups, which is part of the creative economy. Now, interestingly, the startups are, while they're very different, they're operating in a space which is very much was part of the industrial economy. For example, a startup called Airbnb or a Oyo Room is actually delivering services which directly compete with one of the most traditional businesses, which is the hotel business, and in the process disrupting that business. And this we are witnessing across industries, across different areas. So I think the first thing we need to understand is that organizations need to understand, and individuals also, that we need to first understand, comprehend, and acknowledge the pace of change, I would even say the tsunami of change, and it's only going to get faster going forward. So there is a massive amount of change that's already happening, and it's going to hit us even more going forward.
Where do you think this is impacting? So one part is, of course, you are talking of the creative economy as separate from the knowledge economy. What kind of changes and what do you think is actually triggering these changes in the environment?
Okay, the knowledge economy actually to me is more akin to the industrial economy, where the extra thing that you are getting to the table is intellect, right? So if I'm a Java programmer, I bring in Java programming skills. But the creative economy completely changes the whole thing on its head, because now we are talking creativity, we're now talking passion, we're now talking taking initiative, which are the hallmarks of the creative economy. So let's look at few examples, and again, let's look at certain examples which are again very local to us.
Sure.
Okay, so I gave the example, for instance, of the hotel industry, which we are seeing, witnessing right in front of us. Let's take the other one, which is the car industry, for instance, and this has been the talk of, it's been in the newspapers. The car industry has been one of the drivers of the Indian economy. Okay, now what's been happening is lately the entire industry seems to be in a huge slowdown. In fact, I looked up some statistics. It seems the passenger vehicle sales fell 18% in the first quarter of April to June this year. But what was even more shocking was that the June passenger vehicle sales fell by the biggest margin in 18 years. Okay, now we have, so this is not something that's in the future. This is happening right now. Now, disruption is a constant, and I think it's only the current companies which have seen that, which have worked on that, are the only ones who are going to survive. Now, car industry, for instance, and the disruption can come from many places. For instance, right now there's a huge change from the internal combustion engine to the electric car.
Right.
To me, that change is probably as big as when the first, the IC engines came up and the horses were driven out of the market. Till then the horses ruled, right? So it's a complete disruption. So today, if I'm an automobile manufacturer and all I have competence is petrol engines and diesel engines, I'll be out of business. So I think that for a company, starting point is, of course, to understand the pace of change. Secondly is to kind of, not just be a learning organization, but I think more important is to be an unlearning organization, which also means letting go of the past. As they say, what got you here won't get you there. So it doesn't matter how good you have been in the current technology, but if the technology disrupts, then are we prepared to move in that direction, which is a completely new direction altogether? I think that's going to be the biggest the biggest driver of change and the biggest lever that a company can pull in terms of continuing to stay relevant in the marketplace.
So both the examples of the hotel and the car, the core of why it is getting disrupted, of course assisted by technology, but why it is getting disrupted is because people are getting the hang of the value of the sharing economy. Right?
That is right.
So both these instances, the sharing economy or the shift towards the sharing economy, the shift from ownership to access becomes a key component. And I can understand that downstream, suppose people stop buying cars and thereby the car sales and the entire process, the way it works, changes. It also impacts the ancillaries and the parts manufacturing. So it's really going to go down and impact manufacturing and so on. Do you see any core industries like mining or manufacturing, standalone manufacturing, cement? Do you see these kind of industries getting impacted as well, or do you see that they are sort of insulated, at least for the time being?
So even the most traditional industries, I think, are going to face disruption. And in fact, the reason I took the car industry was, if you look at it, it's a fairly, well entrenched, well established, old economy, if I may use that word, economy kind of industry, right? So it's not a new industry, but there also there is a change, there's a disruption. The reason why the disruption happens could be different. Like in the car industry, as you rightly said, it could be a structural issue, right? It's more about people not wanting to own cars, probably wanting to rent cars. But it could be something else. Let's look at another example. Let's say the cell phone industry. Okay. Now, cell phone industry, what's happened is, good old days, when the cell phone came, one manufacturer would make one model. Whatever we have learned in business school in terms of process optimization, economies of scale, all that would be relevant. But enter the VUCA world, what's happening is while making a phone is more a process, but making 8 phones or 12 phones in a year becomes more of a creative thing, right? Because suddenly, and the customer requirements are changing. So again, these are fundamental shifts. Like I talked about the technology shifting. I think the other thing that's happening is there's more power in the hands of the consumer. There is more competition out there, which also means there are more models coming out. So customer requirements also changing very rapidly. So suddenly, if I have to make 12 models in a year, I can no longer look at economies of scale. There other issues will become important in terms of do I understand the customer requirements? And do I understand it quick enough to be able to come out with a product and beat the competition? Am I being innovative in the way I'm pricing it, in the way I'm selling it, in the way I'm manufacturing it? Manufacturing could also become decentralized. For instance, you could have 3D manufacturing. So these technologies are already existing. So short answer to your question is, I think even the most mundane industries, unless there is a big component of protection, which Indian industries have actually enjoyed for a long time, those, I think, industries are the only ones who are probably going to survive a bit longer. But if inevitably, everybody will go through disruption, is my point of view.
Let's take a short break. When we come back, we will hear Suman talk about how understanding the Gen Z and millennials, who make up half the workforce today, is key to the future-proofing of our teams.
You are listening to a Show How To audio original. Podcasting is one of the fastest growing content marketing avenues today. We can help you exploit this largely untapped marketing opportunity. We can craft your audio strategy and leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that smartphone penetration provides. It is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to target audiences.
Welcome back. Before the break, Suman touched upon a key problem with current leadership's lack of understanding of the millennials. Let's listen in how senior leadership needs to adopt a growth mindset, a framework first proposed by Carol Dweck.
I think that sets the premise for what the show is about, that how do you future-proof your team. So in the creative economy, possibly the most important asset that you will have is your human resource, ingenuity, right?
Absolutely.
And that means that this whole disruption, adoption, adaptation, all of that will be hinged upon how well you have taken care of the team or how well you have managed your human resource. So let's dive into that and let's start with the senior management, because one of the views that I hear when I talk to my guests is that senior management, which is 55, 60 kind of age group, although they see the disruption, like in the past, they are keen to get over the next 10 quarters or 5 quarters that they have left and not bother about this long-term problem that is looking them in the face.
You are absolutely right. I think that is one of the probably the biggest challenges in my experience, also working with several companies. Having said that, there is definitely a need for change. There is a willingness to change, but then change becomes also very difficult. So when it comes to senior leadership, I think one thing to fully understand is the pace of change, like I talked about earlier. And the word that certain things which we thought were cliched, like change is the only constant, is no longer cliched. It is actually very true. It's right now playing out. So for the people who have come from a previous generation, one is to make way for the new. Either you renew yourself or you make way for the new. And I understand the challenges. That's not going to happen overnight. But the bigger issue that I see is that it's this thing about not understanding the new generation, the millennials, and branding them in a different way, saying that these guys don't understand, but not understanding that they are our customer base. They are the half the people workforce today is millennials. So across companies, I see there is a big problem in the way the seniors work with the junior people, because it's more than a generation gap. It's the entire way of thinking which is different. So even if I'm a senior leader, even if I'm not moving out or paving the way, either I adopt myself, but I need to adopt a growth mindset. And I think growth mindset, there's a lot of talk about right now, and I firmly believe in that. In a growth mindset, basically the framework which Carol Dweck talks about, having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset, which again it requires a new way of thinking, because it requires me to be vulnerable. It requires me to have empathy. It's not command and control. It requires humility. It requires authentic leadership. So those are all very new things if I'm entrenched in the old way of thinking. But it's important I do that, like building empathy not only for employees but also for customers. If I don't build employee for customers, how will I even understand what are the trends out there? How do I make my products relevant? And then actually making that huge shift from managing, from the traditional sense of the word, which is more, and again, these words actually came from the industrial economy, right? Because industrial economy was about people being in factories. It was about productivity. It was about getting more out of the same resource. And that has to change. That way of thinking has to change. So we really need to move from managing people to really leading people, where instead of putting more controls, we give them that autonomy. We build a sense of purpose for that company so that people are attracted to work for that organization. I think these things are very important, but they're also very difficult to do. But at the same time, that's the only way companies can survive. So all of these have to be taken up at the senior level to make sure that it becomes, the entire company embraces a growth mindset and start, leveraging the workforce that they have. In fact, I go to the extent saying that, it's not human resources, but human beings. Because human resources word came from the industrial revolution, industrial economy, where humans were just another resource. But today, I think that's the most critical resource, as you had started off by saying. So really, it's about how do I leverage, how do I attract, hire, retain, and leverage the workforce that I have. That's going to be critical.
Do you see any example that you can share about management which is actually displaying this agility?
Absolutely. So again, let me take an example. In fact, interestingly, this morning only I had gone to Decathlon, the sports goods store. And I was wondering, as I was entering the store, it was a massive store. There were hundreds of people inside. It was buzzing with activity. And here I'm thinking, what are these guys doing, which is so different, where most other retailers are hurting like big time, right? In fact, and this is not just Indian phenomena, globally this is happening, where retail outlets are under severe pressure from online. Okay. Now, obviously, these guys are doing something different. Okay. Which also brings in a very important point that while this disruption is inevitable, but it is not always a threat. It can also be seen as an opportunity. This is also the best time for companies to build competitive advantage if they're able to embrace these things. Today, what's happening is it's no longer about a product, right? It's about product, it's about people, it's about the planet. And because I was keenly observing, what I noticed was some very interesting things. Let's talk about people, right? First of all, the product. Of course, they have a wide range of products. It's all displayed out there. Very competitive pricing. Everything is labeled out there. In terms of the people who are helping out in the aisles, they're very knowledgeable. Okay. Essentially, they have not taken the traditional retail people. They actually hire a lot of students, who are probably helping out, who are passionate in that area. So for instance, if I'm passionate about cycling, I might help out Decathlon to sell cycles. Okay. Just imagine the level of interaction they would have with the customer because they come with that passion. Customer experience becomes top notch. They have a multi-channel experience, so they are able to make, actually make multi-channel work. So I could probably buy online and then pick it up at the store. Okay. They have challenged basic assumptions. For instance, the big board at the entrance says it's open 365 days a year. Talking about Planet, I was walking the aisle and I found a very nice jersey. I really liked it. Then I saw a nice a nice board in front of it, which said, I'm 100% recycled. Each of our dry run plus t-shirts is made of polyester yarn from 7 recycled plastic bottles. Okay. Now, I thought that was fascinating because, we are all feeling more and more for the environment, given where we are. So when these things happen, these actually strike a chord with the customer. So I just took that as an example, saying that the same people in the same market are not only surviving but thriving because they've changed the rules of the game. So I think companies have a tremendous opportunity, but it's important to let go of the past and embrace the future and, really leapfrog the competition.
Wonderful. So if we move from there and sort of look at the middle management and then go down to the junior individual who is sort of wanting to be future ready or future proof, whichever you look at it, where their current skill set may not be enough to protect their jobs. I mean, in fact, a lot of people who have not been able to be in a retrain or relearning mindset have already started losing jobs. I have been talking to people in the financial industry where there are large chunks of middle tiers of thousands of people who lose their jobs simply because technology will sort of be the intermediary and remove them from the stuff that they're doing. What do you see as the challenge in the middle and in the junior tiers?
I think again, a lot of it goes back to having the right kind of mindset. I am noticing a lot of entitlement mindset which is prevailing in the industry. But once, if you are a junior or a middle management person, the faster you realize the pace of change and the amount of pressure the companies are under, you'll be in a better position to understand what is the value that you need to bring. Going back to that framework that I started off with in Gary Hamel's Creative Economy, he actually also lists the human characteristics that define each of these economies. So he says that when it started with the Industrial Revolution, it was more about obedience and diligence, to be able to follow rules and to have a certain amount of responsibility, accountability. The person comes into work, punches in 9 hours, and that was good enough. Enter the knowledge economy. One layer got built on top of that, which was knowledge and intellect. Okay, the person not only had to be diligent, but also had to bring in certain skill sets, whether it's Java or whatever. Right. Now, these things are enforceable by management. You can demand diligence. You can demand obedience. But problem is in the creative economy, what is required, according to Gary Hamel, is initiative, creativity, and passion. And unfortunately, these things cannot be demanded. So I think the one lesson for middle to junior is that, are you bringing initiative, creativity, and passion to the workplace? Are we able to shed our entitlement mindset? Are we here to solve real problems? Are we being solution oriented? Are we actually, while the management has to make sure that they create an environment of, which is about autonomy and purpose, but as an individual person, am I being purpose driven? Do I know what my sense of purpose is? Right? Am I in the right organization? So I think a lot of the responsibility will now fall on those people. And it's no longer about job descriptions because the things are way too volatile. And the last thing you want to hear in today is that somebody says that's not my job, because nobody knows what the job will be. So think of an entrepreneur, just like he or she does everything when he starts the company. I think today, employees need to become much more broad-based and really do whatever is necessary to take the company to the next level.
Do you see any of these sort of coming like as being a part of the new DNA in the startups that you are looking at?
Yes, and in the startups, this is already happening. In the sense, a lot of people I'm noticing, especially students, even though they know that startups may not be so remunerative, but today a whole bunch of students do not want to enter the traditional large companies. They want to work in startups. And there is a reason for that, because one is startups has a higher sense of purpose and they want to utilize the skill that they have built, certain skills, right? It's also becoming more about skills, right? So for a student, degrees will matter more and less and less. And that's what the research is showing globally. It will really become skill based. So yes, to your question, people are joining startups because of that. And once people join startups, it is also a matter of how much value they're adding, because people are highly visible. They're not, hidden under layers of management. It's a very lean organization, typical startup, and then everybody has to bring their value. And if they don't, then they're out, and they have to find something else, or they have to renew themselves.
So I have a quick question. Do you differentiate from where you see when you say skill set? Are you differentiating knowledge from skill? I mean, typically when we say skill, it is more like hands-on kind of stuff, right? Not strategic. So, or we are using the words interchangeably in your view?
No, I think it's going to be both. So while it's hands-on definitely, but yes, I mean that the learning that people got, and to be able to connect the dots going forward, the so-called knowledge or wisdom, whatever you call it, that also becomes very important. But the timelines have become very compressed. So today, if you join a startup within 5 years, you're supposed to be kind of, right up there in terms of the knowledge, the data, the skills, or whatever. We don't have that 20-year or a 15-year window that the previous generation had.
Wonderful. So before I let you go, Suman, hotels have been disrupted. Automobile pretty much disrupted. The signs are all over. What are the other industries which are, according to you, up for disruption?
Pretty much most industries. And I think what's going to happen is even the more set industries, the customer requirements are going to move from functional, from utility to design based requirements. And that will require again a design mindset. If you look at the car industry, for instance, when I started working, I bought a Maruti 800, right? So it was really the need of the hour was to get a functional car which got you from point A to point B, and which would not break down. So there was a certain amount of mental satisfaction that fine, this at least utility wise, this is good. Today's generation is going beyond utility. So today it's more about, when I talk to my son, he's in college right now, he was telling me what kind of a car he would like to buy. And I'm noticing that, he's really talking more design as opposed to utility, because probably he takes the utility for granted. Okay. And I think it will be good for all industries to remember that as, affluence grows, the requirements will change more towards design rather than pure utility. So, and it does not matter if you look at what's happening in the West, you'll be hard pressed to find a normal toaster in the aisle, because every toaster is a designer toaster, right? Branded by a certain person, right? So, and that's what's going to happen. Every product will eventually bring in some element of design, which we are seeing in other industries. For instance, when you look at a watch today, Titan is hiring a whole bunch of designers to create their design for their watches. Car company Maruti is actually hiring a whole bunch of designers for their cars. So I think it's going to be the movement away from just pure utility has huge ramifications for every industry. And that's going to be, so if one is stuck with utility, they're going to perish. I think that will be another level of disruption.
Talentwise is brought to you by Knowledge Bridge. We produce customized and multilingual visual training content. We have worked on complex processes, products, and skills development for large blue chip brands such as Tata Motors, Mahindra First Choice, Homelane, Epson, Toyota, Citibank, and Consol Neowatt, serving diverse industries. Talk to us for your next custom content requirement and be pleasantly surprised. Call us on 99021 631 32.
Wonderful. Thank you, Suman, for joining me in Talentwise. I really enjoyed our chat. And hopefully we'll talk again in a few months when we come back with our second season.
Excellent. Shubhanjan, thank you so much. And it was wonderful talking to you. I really enjoyed the talk.
Thank you for being with us today on Talentwise. We hope we helped you focus on some actionable ideas today. It was certainly enlightening for us. We hope to see you again on our next episode. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts from, and give us a rating while you're at it. Thank you in advance. This Show How to Original podcast is produced for Knowledge Bridge, the multilingual visual training platform and custom training content creators by Show How to Audio. Hosted by Shubhanjan Sarkar and produced by Rajiv Aditya. See you next time.